Now that Colorado voters have decriminalized psychedelic mushrooms, the state government is starting to work on rules for them.
So 15 people have just been selected to help the state come up with the regulations for the new law. So who are they and what's next? Well, Jeremy Haholo has been following the timeline. We're talking about what's commonly called magic mushrooms and when we will start to see places that are selling them.
Yeah, so probably not until the very end of 2024. That's when the state will start accepting applications for what's being called healing centers. These are expected to be regulated places where people can use them, buy them, and get supplies to grow them. So there's a lot of rules here to be worked out too before the first healing centers can be open. This is a very new path for the state of Colorado. We are only the second state behind Oregon to decriminalize psilocybin mushrooms. A big component here of this effort is using them for mental health. So let's talk about that. Just on Friday, Governor Jared Polis appointed 15 people to a special board called the Natural Medicine Board. These are 15 people, all of different backgrounds, who will use their expertise and advise the state on how psilocybin mushrooms should be regulated. Eventually, once rules are in place and definitions are established, people will be able to go to these healing centers to use mushrooms under the supervision of a licensed facilitator. So who's the facilitator and what requirements will they have to meet? That's what this board will be working on. We've spoken to a lot of people who have already been using psilocybin to address things like depression and anxiety. The board will have to create rules to keep people safe, especially those who believe mushrooms may help them with their mental health. So let's talk about this Natural Medicine Board and the 15 people on it. You can read more about them on 9news.com here in a bit to get more specific details about each person. But in summary, here are some of the experts on this board. You have a paramedic, you have therapists, you have psychologists who have experience working with veterans. You have experts on natural medicines and their use by indigenous cultures. There's a lot of historical context there. And there's a medical doctor out of Arizona who is currently studying psilocybin therapy on the board, and one law enforcement officer, a sheriff out of Pueblo, Colorado. These are just some of the 15 members' backgrounds. So this is somewhat similar to what cannabis was like in Colorado. You still have the state decriminalizing these elements under state law, but we all got to remember this is still illegal under federal law. So the board is going to have to take a lot of that into consideration as they come up with these rules.
Yeah, you would think that what we went through with the legalization of marijuana in a variety of ways would be a blueprint, but it sounds like it's rather different. However, I will say what we have seen, as we did with marijuana and may be seeing right now, culturally, people are viewing it differently. If you had pitched this 10 years ago, people would say, this is crazy.
Yeah, and there's empirical evidence out there that shows that psilocybin therapy can have an impact on someone's mental health when it comes to their PTSD, anxiety, depression. So a lot of people in policy are paying attention to those scientific studies. There's studies that are still going on right now. There still needs to be more studies, a lot of people say. But the climate has changed in a lot of ways, and we're hearing from a lot of people who've been using these, elements for a very long time.
Marijuana has proved to be very lucrative and had a big role in how much money the state was able to raise. Yeah. Is there a piece of that in this as well?
Well, there's also on the board, there are members of the board who specialize in equity and people who need to have access, who may not have access to stuff like this. People maybe from lower income backgrounds. So you have people on the board who are going to be pushing to make sure that everybody has access to this, not just people who have the means and resources to pay for it.
Yeah, I think if you'd have told us even 3-4 years ago this would have passed on a statewide ballot by the numbers that it did, we'd have said no. Yeah. But here we are.
It was still a very thin margin. Remember, it passed by 54%. So,
but you didn't think it had a chance. I think a few years ago it would be like no. But I think that there's been a lot of research and scientific evidence that this works for a lot of people.
Yeah, there's a lot of people coming forward now. I mean, this use among a lot of people has been underground. There's people that have been helping other people on the underground. I've talked to people who've said they've been encouraged by their medical doctors, hey, check into this, but that's all been underground. Now that we're seeing it come up to the surface, like a mushroom, more people are talking about it, and we'll see how the state handles this. It's going to be interesting to watch.
Certainly will. All right, Jeremy, thanks.